In today's video, we're going to be presenting the fifth of 6 principles extracted of the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, the fear of the Lord. And this was extracted of verse 14, which says, I know that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done this so that all should stand in awe before him. Which means that everything that God does is perpetual, definitive. No one can distort it. No one can add or subtract. And this is inclusive to all the principles I've been presenting so far. That there is a time for everything. And that everything is beautiful in its time. We do not have enough understanding. That there is nothing better than to be happy. And now we're presenting the 5th principle, the fear of the Lord. And God did it this way so that all should stand in awe before him, so that we all fear him. And this has to do with our lifestyle, with our day-to-day, with the time he has given us on this earth, with the circumstances we're going through. And there's no bigger mistake than to resist this and to fight against the fear of the Lord. There is nothing higher than God's purpose. And one of the main purposes is for us to fear him. Yes, for the human being to fear God. Unfortunately, our fallen nature tends to rebel against God, against situation, against seasons, against circumstances, to rebel internally against God and not fear him. And by the way, it is worth mentioning that the fear of God doesn't save us but protect us. I'm saved by faith, by what Jesus Christ did in the cross for us. And I know there are people out there, and I personally too, went through numerous situations where the fear of God simply kept me from going astray. Everything God does is so we can fear him, so that we keep in mind that there is a God in heaven that we should be fearing, whom we worship, whom we love, who gave absolutely everything for us. Nevertheless, a God which should be fearing. In the book of Leviticus, God is a God that liberates his people. God is a God that loves his people. God is a God that hears his people. But he also gives laws to his people so that they fear him. We already know it is impossible to comply with all that righteousness and justice the law of God demands from each one of us. But just to cite some of these verses, you shall not revile the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind. Why? Because it's not right? Because you're being rude, relentless? Of course. But mainly because you shall fear your God. Everything God does, whatever happens, and what doesn't happen, and the times you go through are designed for you to learn to fear God. Do you remember what Amalek did to Israel in his journey out of Egypt? They attacked the people of God when they were faint and weary, and struck down all who lagged behind, including women and children. They did this because they didn't fear God. And this is in Deuteronomy 25:18. And because of that, God blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heaven. We're talking about an entire nation here. The fear of God is something you don't play with. Proverbs 9:10 states, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. King David was a man who was singled out by God itself to become king. And God brings his prophet Samuel, who is now being persecuted by Saul, whom he anointed in the first place to become king, but since he was rejected by God, he wants to kill both the prophet and David. And David knows it is because he was already chosen by God and anointed by Samuel. And there were 2 concrete moments where David could have cut his throat out, but he didn't. Not because he didn't feel like, not because he didn't have a motive, a reason, or the right to do it, but he doesn't kill him because he simply feared God. Listen to me, there are things you do and there are things you don't do, not necessarily because you understand them, or have a motive, or right or no, but because of the fear of the Lord. And for you, what's the fear of God to you? An emotion? A decision? A combination of both? Comment down below and let me know what your opinion is. Thank you all. God bless you, and until the next video.